Hey everybody, welcome to Dan Bullman Photography. Today I want to talk to you about slide film. Specifically, I want to talk to you about the two slide films that are on offer from Fujifilm. One of which is PROVIA 100 and the other is VELVIA 100. Now each of these PROVIA and VELVIA are available in a couple of different speeds, but I'm going to talk about the 100 speed films today. So recently I took my Pentax Spotmatic camera and shot a roll of VELVIA and a roll of PROVIA in East Boston. Now it was sort of an overcast day, so we don't really have any sort of really high contrast scenes, but I think it was a good test ground for both of these films to show how they render colors and what look you can produce with each one of the films. So I don't want to cloud your judgment with a bunch of my thoughts beforehand, so I want to show you some photos first, and then at the end I'll give you a recap of which film I think, which one I prefer, and which ones I think are better for which situations. So without further ado, let's take a look at some photos. Okay, so we're starting off with Fuji VELVIA, and this is a photograph of some flowers, and you can just see right away how the photo just pops, the color just popped right out of the photo, especially the reds up at the top and the yellows down here. Just a really colorful photo, and this is just characteristic of how VELVIA saturates colors. So again here, this is a mural that's sort of three-dimensional, has some pieces sticking out, and it's, again, very colorful. Now this is a very colorful mural in real life, but I would say that it's more colorful in the photograph than in real life. The colors are a little bit more saturated. So again, here's a photo of some sneakers up against a brick wall, and you can just see the tones in there. It's just, the colors just really pop out, and it's really can be kind of overwhelming to look at, but I think this photograph looks pretty cool. Now here's an example of how VELVIA handles skin tones. Now if you look at the hockey player who's shooting the puck there, you can see that his skin tone in the photograph looks basically the same as his shirt, which is orange. So it's just really not a flattering film to use for portraiture. It just makes people's skin tone turn orange or just become a more saturated color that's not exactly flattering. Here's another example of that. If you look at the two people crossing the street, both of them basically just have this orange glow like they have a spray-on tan. Alright, so this next photograph was shot on PROVIA, and the colors are fairly saturated, but if you look at the water and if you look at the sky in the background, it's very muted, but in particular in the foreground, the reds really pop out, and I've noticed that with PROVIA, reds become really saturated, sometimes blues, and then greens as well. So PROVIA is not exactly like Portra 400 or Portra 160, which are very neutral in their color tones. It does saturate, but it's very selective in the types of colors that it saturates. So here's a photo of some shoes that were on the harbor, and again, this is fairly true to life. I think with VELVIA that the shoes and the textures in the ground would look a little bit more saturated, but this is fairly true to what the scene was when I photographed it. But here, this isn't a great photo, but I just wanted to include it in terms of how PROVIA can saturate colors to an extreme. If you look at this grass in the foreground, it's very saturated, as well as the American flag up here in the top. And the bricks are a little bit more saturated. So PROVIA can have a very saturated look that can be similar to results you can get from VELVIA, but it just depends on the types of colors that are in the scene you're photographing. This is another one. I took this actually at Harvard Square, but this was the same roll of film. And if you look in the background, you can tell the skin tones of the woman on the bicycle are very true to life, I would say, while some of the colors in the foreground, like the postcards with it's a Boston postcard with the Citgo logo, the reds are very saturated, and even the trees in the background, the greens are fairly saturated as well. But I've noticed that PROVIA handles skin tones fairly well, and it's good for portraiture. This is a portrait I took of my friend Morena, and again, some of the colors are saturated. Like her shirt is, or her sweater here is fairly saturated, but her skin tones are very true to life. Now, this was actually shot on medium format film with the Pentacon 6, and I believe this was a scan that I did myself and post-processed. But again, the skin tones look good. If I was shooting this on VELVIA, like, she would look like she had a spray-on tan. Okay, so now I just want to do a side-by-side comparison of PROVIA and VELVIA. So as you can see, the photo on the left-hand side is VELVIA 100. It's a little bit overexposed. Some of the highlights are blown out, but it has a little bit more punch to it than the photo on the right, which was shot on PROVIA 100. Now, these were, again, shot same day, same time, same lighting conditions, and they were both processed and scanned by the same lab. So, again, you can always sort of remove or add saturation when you scan a photo or do post-processing on a computer, but the natural colors of the VELVIA here pop out a little bit more. But again, this isn't always the case. Sometimes PROVIA can look just as saturated as VELVIA. And we'll move on to the next example, which sort of shows this. So I want you to guess which photograph is VELVIA and which one is PROVIA. And I'll give you a moment to do this. Ready to see the results? Okay, so the photograph on the left was shot with PROVIA, and the one on the right was VELVIA. Now, they look very similar, but when I'm looking at these photographs, I think the photograph that was shot on PROVIA actually looks a little more saturated than the VELVIA photograph. Now, again, some of this could do with the scan or with how the images were exposed. I mean, the exposure is fairly good on both of them. I would say it's pretty spot on. Maybe it's slightly overexposed in the VELVIA image. But again, like, reds get very saturated in PROVIA, in some cases blues. A lot of times, if there's a very blue sky, I would say PROVIA does a good job at saturating it and making it look really nice. So again, it's just down to personal taste of what you want to photograph, I think. So I hope you enjoyed those photos and that comparison. It wasn't really exactly a scientific test by any means, and your results may vary based on exposure or the types of scenes you're photographing, but for me, I think PROVIA is the more dynamic film. You can use it in a lot more situations, and especially if you're shooting portraits like I do, PROVIA is a really great film. I think it does a great job at rendering skin tones, whereas VELVIA, if you're photographing people with a lighter complexion, just makes them look orange and weird. So I think especially if you're shooting portraits and you love the look of slide film, PROVIA is a great option, but I would stay away from VELVIA. Now, as far as landscapes go, I think you could really use either film, depending on which look you prefer. I think VELVIA saturates colors a bit more, a lot more in some cases. But as we've seen with the photo of the mopeds, or the Vespas, PROVIA can saturate colors quite a bit as well, and sometimes even more so than VELVIA. So I think it's all in the type of look you prefer. Now, another thing to note is that PROVIA has a slightly wider dynamic range, so it is a little bit more forgiving if you over or underexpose it. Not by much, but it is a little bit more forgiving than VELVIA is. Now, ultimately, like anything with photography or art, it's up to personal taste in terms of which film stock you prefer. So personally, I prefer PROVIA. Like I said, that's because I shoot portraits, and even when I'm shooting landscapes or cityscapes, I like to have a film that's a little bit more dynamic in terms of the situations that I shoot. So I prefer PROVIA, but there's a lot of people out there who really love VELVIA and like it better and want to shoot with it. So I think it's all up to personal taste, and whichever film you prefer, they're both really good. And obviously it's not mutually exclusive, you can shoot with both of them. So I want to hear what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. What do you think of PROVIA and VELVIA? Which one do you prefer? What do you think of the test that I did? And just want to hear, what you guys think about this film. So As always, if you like these videos, please subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the red box next to my head or by clicking on the subscribe link down by my channel name. We'll have a new video coming out very soon, so keep your eye out on that. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.